Well, welcome to our ongoing webinar series on coping with COVID. I'm Dr. Wendy Smeltzer, National Medical Director for Wello and Medical Director for Enlive, our Calgary clinic. And it's really my pleasure today to bring back our dietitian, Kelly Anne Erdman, and our fitness manager, Jamie Wilkins, for today's webinar. So I think we're all well into this new reality of staying home as much as possible, social distancing, self-isolation criteria. And although things are starting to talk and are reopening gradually, it all looks a little bit different now. So looking after our health through this time is more important than ever before to prevent infection and keep ourselves as healthy and strong as possible in case we are exposed to this virus. So we're continuing to look for new ways to maintain our fitness levels and ensure we have good nutrition and we're not resorting to those comfort foods during stressful times. So we have two great experts who are here to share their knowledge and their expertise with us today about how to achieve the best possible health in these times. So if you have any questions, I'm going to just point towards the chat function there and feel free to send in questions. We'll have a question answer period at the end and we'll do our best to get through all of these questions. So our first speaker is Kelly Anne Erdman, and she's our registered dietitian with over 25 years experience in helping people with therapeutic and proactive nutrition. She works with weight control, eating disorders, and she also specializes in sport nutrition and consults for the Canadian Sport Institute and works with several national sport teams. She always provides such sound and practical nutritional advice, so looking forward to her advice today. So over to you, Kelly Anne.
Thank you, Dr. Smeltzer. I'm just going to start this video. There we go. Awesome. We're good to go. Wonderful. Thank you for the invitation. This is round two. We had an opportunity to chat previously about nutrition specifically to avoid getting the coronavirus and minimizing our risk there. And now it seems that we're in for this, all settled in for this long haul and the new normal. And that can mean a low-grade stress response that we may or may not even be aware of. But what we found with stress, it elevates our cortisol levels, and as a result, that can lower testosterone and other hormones, as well as contribute to high blood sugar. For some, if you have diabetes, you might have noticed some changes in the blood values that you are reading, and then potentially others might even be experiencing higher cholesterol levels, and these are all sort of a stress response scenario. So I wanted to really present today specific proactive nutrition strategies to minimize this stress response and what are the best things that we can do from the nutritional side of things. First things first, it's all about the timing of when we eat. We should be eating often, and really that's a minimum of 3 meals a day. For some people, the snacks can be a bit excessive, so maybe just stick to the 3 meals, potentially add in a nice protein-rich afternoon snack. But what happens if we haven't eaten for a while? Our blood sugar gets low, and next thing you know, that stress response is going to be more pronounced. Our ability to make decisions may be compromised when we're in that hypoglycemic, low blood sugar state of mind. We call that hangry, and technically it's now a word in the dictionary, hangry. I think you know what I mean. Secondly, let's keep well hydrated. Our brain is over 75% water content. So if we're able to really support thinking clearly and managing our stress levels, really need to keep on top of hydration, which brings me to my next point about caffeine, thinking of some caffeinated beverages. And caffeine, well, it gets a lot of us going, I can't lie, but too much, and the stress response is now through the roof. So we'd like to suggest maximum 2 cups of coffee a day, but I need to define a cup because some of you beside you right now may have a cup that's really more like 2 or 3 cups in volume. A cup is 250 mils, 8 ounces. So ideally we say a drip coffee, 2 cups a day, and that would be equivalent to 4 shots of espresso or 4 cups of black tea. Other sources of caffeine could be green tea, hot chocolate, and chocolate, of course, itself. So please keep that in mind. And if you're having issues with sleeping, thinking of caffeine, realize that the half-life for caffeine is 4 to 6 hours. So it stays in your system for that duration. Therefore, if you're having a hard time getting to sleep, probably best to stop your caffeine consumption by, let's say, 2 p.m. Drink more water earlier in the day to help you sleep so that you don't have to wake up in the night devoid because of all that late night water you were consuming. And then some natural ways to manage sleep would be a calcium-rich choice of food at bedtime. That could be a yogurt, but even a calcium magnesium with vitamin D. Magnesium functions as a natural sleep aid and muscle relaxant. So a good time to take that at bedtime. Having the vitamin D in that mix helps to absorb the calcium. And there are some other product sleep aids on the market. Occasional use of melatonin or even 5-HTP could also be an option for you. Further to that, let's look at some additional tips. And that would be consume enough carbohydrates to energize, but not excessive that you're putting on, I guess we're calling it now the COVID-15. And that can be from just not being as physically active and eating more foods. Carbohydrates definitely have a comfort effect for many of us when we feel that stress. But carbohydrates are the main fuel that our brain uses, again, to be able to manage stress, stay focused, preventing low blood sugar, having just enough carbohydrates, but ideally, let's balance those with a protein. So for example, rather than just having a piece of toast, think of, I'm going to have an egg with it, or some Greek yogurt, or some peanut butter. So then we're balancing that carbohydrate from the bread or fruit by adding a protein, like nuts, Greek yogurt, eggs, cottage cheese, if that's sort of breakfasty foods. So again, want to minimize low blood sugar to minimize that stress response. That being said, often I'm finding many people are craving high sugar foods, and it really seems to be a means to self-medicate. We feel better, it affects our hormones as a satisfying effect. At the same time, high sugar and processed foods are known to be what we call pro-inflammatory, and inflammation, not great for us, of course. More on that in a moment. And also, these high sugar and processed foods tend to trigger our urge to eat more of these foods. So keep these foods out of sight, out of mind. Overcoming emotional eating is a big one these days. When we're looking at managing COVID, many people are reaching for food to self-medicate. But first things first, I would ask you, what triggers your urge to eat? Thought of that for a moment? Anyone? Think of hunger as an urge. And definitely hunger, we need to eat, but there's many other factors that can increase our urge to eat. Ideally, let's try to recognize, what could this represent? Is it stress? Is it boredom? Secondly, what else can I do? Besides, I can always go and eat, but what else can I do to resolve this urge to eat? So it's all about trying to reprogram the way that we respond to certain foods and certain reactions. So we need a whole session just to talk about emotional eating, but definitely it's a major factor in terms of strategies to manage our stress. Looking at this slide here, we have a pyramid, a food pyramid, and if some of you may recognize, this is a Mediterranean diet. It has the strongest scientific evidence to use this diet to support what we refer to as systemic inflammation. In response to stress, we have this reaction in our body, free radicals are produced, causing cellular damage, and therefore this Mediterranean diet is known to reduce inflammation. Remember I mentioned pro-inflammatory foods, so those would be high sugar, highly processed foods are pro-inflammatory. Conversely, these are the foods known to reduce inflammation. At the top, well, meat, the suggestion is not very often, monthly. Sweets, eggs, poultry and fish. Weekly, I would say on a daily basis, cheese and yogurt, olive oil, but even avocado oil would be a great choice. Fruits, vegetables, And then the legumes, dried beans and peas. Those aren't the green beans, but here I'm referring to black beans, kidney beans. The base of this is carbohydrate. These are all carbohydrate-based foods, fruits, vegetables, and your starchy foods on the bottom. Has been promoted as a Mediterranean diet to reduce inflammation. High water consumption, and alcohol is even part of the mix. I don't see caffeine here though. Anyways, this diet is very high in monounsaturated fats. So the monounsaturates are coming from avocado, your nuts, your seeds, olive oil. In Canada, we produce a lot of canola oil. That would be a monounsaturated fat. Most of us are familiar with your essential fats, and that would be omega-3 and omega-6, both of which are polyunsaturated fats, and of course our best source of omega-3s from our fatty fish. And there's 4 that come to mind: salmon, mackerel, sardines, and herring. Other fish are excellent for protein, but they don't have the oily composition to have the high omega-3 content. And then further to that, when we look at within nutrition strategies to manage our stress, in addition to, say, this Mediterranean way of eating, we're also looking at high amounts of B vitamins. They're involved in all our energy pathways. I'm a real fan of a B50 complex, to take that in the morning because it can give you some energy. So best not to take it at bedtime, but it's a great choice to help manage our stress. Vitamin D, we should add to the mix. Vitamin C. The daily max for vitamin C is about 2,000 milligrams a day. And then of course, further to that, if we're looking at specifically trying to boost our immune system, because when we're stressed, our immune system is compromised and we may not be as strong to reduce our risk of getting sick. And that brings us to the point of building a healthy gut with prebiotic foods. So these are foods that when we consume, we're feeding the healthy bacteria in our gut. Probiotics is when we consume the healthy bacteria. So that being said, prebiotic-based foods would be your fruits and vegetables and whole grains, inulin, psyllium, ground flax. Probiotics naturally occurring in foods, in fermented foods like kefir and kombucha, and also in supplement forms, and of course, probiotics in yogurts. Technically, a regular yogurt versus a Greek yogurt would be preferred for the probiotic. And more specifically, you want to go with a product, a probiotic, if you're buying a supplement there, that's got a variety of strains. The lactobacillus would be, and the bifido and the rhamno, just looking at on a particular probiotic for the multi-strains is what we're looking for. I think a 5 to 10 billion CFU, that represents the live count, should be sufficient. One point I want to mention, a popular diet these days, ketogenic diet. People are following the keto diet and they're losing weight. This diet is 5% carbohydrate. And studies have shown 5 weeks on the keto diet is like taking antibiotics for 2 weeks. It destroys the gut bacteria, the healthy gut, your immune system. So while people might use the keto diet to reduce their caloric intake and lower their body weight, it's not the healthiest for a strong immune system, and definitely it would not fit into the Mediterranean way of eating to reduce systemic inflammation. So a lot of key points and moving parts to keep in mind, and I look forward to your questions. Jamie's going to take it from here on the fitness side of things, and if you can add to our chat line, and we'll be able to address your nutrition related questions after Jamie speaks.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Kelly Anne. Always, as always, great information and information and advice for us. So thank you for that. So I'd like to now introduce Jamie Wilkins. Jamie is our fitness manager in our multidisciplinary clinic here at Live in Calgary. He has his bachelor's degree in kinesiology and went on to do certification in exercise physiology. And after several years working in a rehabilitation and exercise therapy setting, joined our clinic where he implemented a movement medicine program in addition to our other fitness and performance-based fitness programs. He's passionate about fitness, as I'm sure you'll see in a moment, and he loves helping clients achieve their very best health through an integrative health approach. So over to you, Jamie. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you very much, Dr. Smeltzer. Hello, everybody. Thank you for being here. I'm Jamie Wilkins. I'm here to speak on fitness strategies and how physical activity can help us cope with COVID-19. I'd also like to thank, before I get started, Kelly Anne. That was awesome. I really enjoy your presentations every time. My goal and intention for today is to help us understand why it is so important that we take time to focus on our health through physical activity, as well as provide us some practical solutions and strategies for getting started and staying motivated. If you've been to our webinar before, I'm going to go over some of the same information for those who are new, but I will be elaborating on more practical applications that we can use. We're going to start by going over the benefits to exercise and physical activity at a high level, since they're fairly well known. But again, more specifically, why are these benefits so important to us now? Well, the majority of us are at home and experiencing a major change in our routines. From there, we'll get into 3 topics. We're going to focus on cardiovascular health. Here, we're talking about our lungs, our heart, all of our body systems to get us breathing. We'll get into muscular strength and endurance. And then finally, we'll wrap the session talking about one of my favorite things to talk about and get on my soapbox about is mobility training. As we touch on each of these topics, I'll provide you with the minimum requirements for adults and explain a few of the principles, as well as give you strategies to implement a plan for each. So let's go ahead and get started with the well-known benefits of exercise and physical activity. So first, let's talk about the physical benefits. I'm just working through my slides here. All right, so physical benefits first. Not only reducing the risk of, but managing some serious health conditions such as diabetes, heart disease, and others. In times like this, where our health is very much on our minds, we want to be certain that we're being proactive in reducing our risk of any other health concerns. Staying physically active is often one of the first preventative measures key to helping reducing health risks. Second would be building and maintaining our strength and endurance and mobility. This is, again, all about having a strong, healthy, and durable body so that we can continue to do the things that we love to do for longer. Here, we're again talking about longevity. We're trying to build a base functionality for our body so that as we age, we're able to continue to play with our kids or do the activities that we really enjoy to do. Probably one of the most relevant points on physical benefits is that exercise helps boost the immune system. It makes us more stronger and more resilient to infection. So we'll move to also just on this page here, getting started and staying motivated. If we could go back up actually to physical, thank you. So getting started, staying motivated. Now these are some easy points that you guys should be focused on to, if you're feeling like it's a tough time getting started, or you're just having a hard time staying motivated and staying consistent. These are some points I want you guys to focus on. So number 1 would be do what you love to do. It's easy to say I have a hard time exercising for the sake of exercise. So what I really want to focus on is, don't think of it as physical activity as exercise. It's anything that gets you moving. So you can pick any activity that you enjoy doing, whether it be swimming, hiking, or playing with your kids. That's what you should be focused on doing. Next would be setting a goal. Set an intention. What do you really want to get out of this? So first thing is decide why you want to start working on physical activity. Is it to continue to play with your grandkids? Is it to get a personal best on a marathon or something like that? Understanding why is the first step. Next would be to set a goal, being specific. The acronym SMART goals standing for be specific about what you want to do, make it measurable, make it attainable, make it relevant to what you want to accomplish and why. And finally, make sure that you set a time on that. So if I'm saying, oh, I want to work on my fitness, that's not necessarily a very smart goal in the sense. You'd want to say, well, I want to be able to do a full push-up or a full pull-up. Why? Because I want to be able to be on the playground with my kids and swing from the monkey bar, something like that. And I want to be able to do that by the end of June. So now you kind of set that goal and the intention, and you understand why you want to do it at the core. That's going to help motivate you and keep you consistent. Next point here would be set a routine. So it's very important that you stay consistent. It's not always about, I got a really hard workout in and then I take a week off. Setting a routine is all about being consistent and setting time aside to focus on your health. You should be setting time aside at any point in your day, just to say, I need time for me, whether it's 30 minutes or an hour. This is your time to focus on your health. I use reminders on my calendar to tell me, hey, here's the days that I need to be doing exercise, even an alarm on my phone at lunchtime or throughout the day to remind me to get out of my desk, get outside and go for a short walk, something like that. Next point here would be identify the barriers that you're going to face. You're going to have to identify, what am I going to run into? Is it going to be issues with my energy, my time, or access to equipment? And then get support. Find people that understand what you're doing and why, and then rely on them for some support, whether it be information or encouragement. So here we can move on to the mental health benefits of exercise. Now, number one, reducing stress. During and after exercise, your body releases chemicals into your body and brain to help boost your mood while reducing your stress. So if you're feeling stress, anxiety, or depression, physical activity at any level is one of the first steps towards managing the symptoms that come with it. Now, I do acknowledge that it's not always as easy as saying, well, I will get out and do it if we are experiencing symptoms of depression. So you need to give yourself some acknowledgement for the little things you do, make incremental changes, and then continue just to put in that effort, remind yourself why you're doing it, and continue to move down that road. Second would be improving sleep. We all know that sleep is a crucial factor when considering our overall health. Better sleep leads to better functioning body and mind and a reduced risk of illness. Next here would be a sense of control and achievement. It's really easy for us to feel a lack of control and feel a little bit helpless while staying at home. Making a commitment to focus on your health is one of the best ways to take back a sense of that control, and sticking to a plan and routine gives you a sense of accomplishment each day. That consistency will begin to yield results that will keep you motivated. Now, some of the same getting started and staying motivated points are exactly the same for a reason here, because it's the same strategy I want you guys implementing. Number one, doing what you love. Doing what you love keeps you committed and makes your activity feel like less of a chore. That's the easiest point I can make, is just, it makes it feel like, you enjoy doing it, you're going to stick with it. Setting goals, again, to keep you motivated and focused on what you want to achieve. Keep these goals where you can see them, so that they can act as a reminder of why you made that commitment. It's important to identify that why. Why is this goal so important to me to keep you motivated? Setting a routine is very important. Make small incremental changes, as I mentioned, when introducing a new routine. Give yourself some forgiveness. If you fall off for a couple of days, get right back to it. Identify what's going to stop you from achieving your goals. I mentioned a lot of the same, I'll say excuses, but these are valid excuses that we see with our clients are, I don't have the time, energy, or access to information or equipment. I'd like us to kind of run through the rest of the presentation with that in mind, that we are likely facing those same barriers, and how do we address those? One thing would be, again, find a support system, whether it be friends, family, or other professionals, to help keep you motivated and keep you, I'll say, accountable to the goals that you're setting. So as we move forward onto the next slides, I really want everybody thinking about how these strategies can be applied to your lives and your routines. Like I said, it's not about uprooting your current routines, but making incremental changes and staying committed over time is what matters most. The recommendations for the next 3 slides are made from the Canadian Society of Exercise Physiology, the Canadian Heart and Stroke Foundation, and the Mayo Clinic. So for cardiovascular health, we're talking about aerobic activities that get your heart and your lungs pumping. Why is aerobic activity so important? We're talking about how effectively your lungs, blood, heart, and muscles are able to transport and use oxygen to produce energy. So your lungs' ability to take in that oxygen, blood's ability to transport it around your body, your heart's ability to pump the blood, and the muscles' ability to take that oxygen and actually start to work with it. Higher efficiencies in these processes allow us to work harder for longer with more efficiency, which means less stress on the body systems, which leads to a reduction in the risk of things like heart disease and other acute or chronic health issues. So reading through this slide here, adults require a minimum of 150 minutes of moderate aerobic activity and 75 minutes of vigorous aerobic activity each week. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to define the difference between these two since heart rate ranges need to be individualized. So first, let's touch on moderate activity and we'll come back to vigorous. So we'll hit the next slide here. Moderate is defined as anything that gets your heart rate between 50 to 70% of your heart rate max. Now, what is my heart rate max, you ask? There's an easy formula to figure that out. So on the left side, moderate activity, your predicted heart rate max is equal to 220 minus your age. So in this example, we're taking a 45-year-old individual. Their predicted heart rate max would be 175 beats per minute. Moderate activity, again, defined as 50% to 70% of that range. So for this individual, we're talking between 87 beats per minute to 122 beats per minute. You might ask, well, how do I know if I'm in that range? An easy way would be use a wearable device on your wrist or on your rib cage, or take your pulse. Now, that's not, if you don't have access to a wearable device, and you certainly don't want to be taking your pulse every 2 minutes during your activity, what are some ways we can figure out if we're in that zone or not? So here are some clues to tell you if you're in moderate zones. Number one, your breathing quickens, but you're not completely out of breath. You develop a light sweat after about 10 minutes of that activity. And three, you can usually perform this activity and carry on a conversation, but you wouldn't be able to sing. So a conversation, you can definitely kind of chit chat with your partner or whoever you're working out with or whatever activity you're doing, but singing is a little bit out of that zone. On to the next slide. What are some activities that would fall under moderate? We're talking about a brisk walk. So when I talk about brisk walk, it's walking with some intention outside. Your intention is to feel your heart rate going. You could be walking through your neighborhood, hitting the hills, doing stairs, hiking, swimming. I'll add slow resistance training to this piece, and we'll talk about it on the next slide, actually. But active living is number one. Again, I'm trying to take away the perception that it needs to be exercise, formal exercise, and we're talking about anything, any activity that gets your heart into that range there. We can go back up to the first slide of, yeah, perfect. So now we're going into vigorous. Now, vigorous is defined as 70 to 85% of your heart rate max. Using that same individual at 45 years old, predicted max heart rate of 175 beats per minute. This individual is working in a vigorous range of 122 to 148 beats per minute. Again, I don't have a wearable device. I don't want to take my pulse. How do I know if I'm in that zone? Number one, your breathing is deep and rapid. Okay, you need to focus on your breath. You definitely can't say more than a few words without pausing for breath, let alone singing. So you'd find that if I was walking or running with a partner, carrying a conversation should be a little bit more difficult. You need to focus on that deep, rapid breathing. And you would develop a sweat after only a few minutes of this activity typically. We'll go into now what are the activities that would be associated with vigorous. Something like a jog, a bike ride, again with some intention. So I'm not riding through my neighborhood looking at the houses. I'm picking a path where it's relatively empty. I'm turning the gears up and I'm trying to push myself. You guys will know when you're in the zone because again, you're deep and rapid out of breath. I'll add athletics into this. It doesn't need to be in any professional sense. It doesn't need to be organized sport. Think about it as leisure. Playing with your kids in the backyard for 30 minutes, I'm certain will gas you out. So try to get out there, notice when your heart rate's getting up, and then get that in for about 30 minutes. In some cases here, circuit training and high intensity interval training, HIIT training, becomes very popular because you're working on resistance training exercises while working on your vigorous aerobic minutes. So we'll actually get a little bit more into detail on how to do that on the next slide. But again, active daily living, super important to understand that it does not need to be in a gym setting. You have access to the outside, you have access to your living room. That's all it takes. You need a body and some time and space. That's it. Summing up, cardiovascular, what does your week look like? Moderate activity, we mentioned 150 minutes per week. So my challenge to everybody here would be let's get a minimum of 30 minutes for 5 days per week of a walk outside. So go pick a hill somewhere or somewhere with some stairs, or if you're on a flat area, just kind of pick up the pace a little bit. But 30 minutes a day, very manageable to get our 150 minutes in that week. For vigorous activity, depending on the length of time you're doing it, if you're going a little bit harder, so higher intensity, meaning you're working harder, you don't have to go for as much volume, meaning time. So if I'm working super hard, I'm obviously not going to be able to sustain that effort. So if we're doing, say, 15 minutes of vigorous activity, we need to be doing that roughly 5 times per week. But if we're moving towards 25 to 30 minutes, we're thinking maybe 2 to 3 times a week will get you to those minutes there. Perfect. And again, those were our ideas for what we're hitting with our moderate and vigorous smitting. We can move on to the next slide here, because we are now shifting to physical strength and endurance. Now, why is this important? Here we're talking about maintaining performance in everyday activities and promoting bone density, stronger tendons and ligaments, which protects you from injury now and down the road. Again, at the core of it, it keeps you doing the things that you love to do for longer, making us more resilient to the unpredictable demands that life may throw at us. And what do I mean by that? Again, I use this example a lot. I'm talking about if I get myself into a compromising position, whether I'm bending over to pick something up, and say my kid jumps on my back and I wasn't prepared for that, there's likely an injury either right then or down the road from that piece. So it's making sure that we're able to take the hits and blows that life is going to throw at us and come back a little bit stronger. I like to define resistance training as well. In this sense, resistance training is any load that you can put on your body, be it gravity or some kind of external stimulus like a weight, an elastic band, or even water in some cases. So just to define what resistance exercise, I think it's important to talk on that. So the point of this all is to say, how can we get resistance training done at home? Well, first, the recommendation is to perform resistance training a minimum of twice per week. The good news is that these resistance exercises or these resistance workouts that you'll be doing twice per week can actually go towards the minutes for moderate and vigorous from the previous slide. A point I'd make here again is to train all major muscle groups. So if you're only doing twice per week, I would recommend certainly working on a full body approach to your workouts. Loading your movements with weight right off the bat is not necessary. Try introducing exercises slowly with only body weight. I think it's the best way to get started. It allows you to feel safe. It allows you to safely test a few different movements and really experiment with what you like to do and what works best for you based off of your goals, your experience, and whatever limitations you may be facing. Again, here, focus on some fundamental movements. And what I mean by this is that there are some movements that we really need to be confident in before we start getting fancy with variations and different loads in those little basic movements. So there's so many exercises to choose from out there. Choose the ones that you feel comfortable with that still give you a challenge. A great way to build your own workout is to incorporate fundamental movements to give you a great base and that are essential for your fitness. So if we could bring the camera right to me, and I'd actually like to walk you guys through a couple different movements, and we'll talk about how we're going to go about applying this to your guys' structure. I'm sure this is on me now. I'm going to back it up. Now I'm going to give us 7 movements, and this is going to be our structure. And we talk about circuit training. I want you thinking, well, how am I going to kind of perform these movements and get the minutes that I need in my cardio? So number one movement that we need to be doing at home is a squat, and some kind of vertical force where I'm squatting down and pushing. I'm going to make sure you guys see my feet a little bit more. Thank you for bearing with me there. So it's a squat of some kind where I'm dropping my butt and I'm pushing into the floor and up. I'm working on my ankles, knees, hips, back, shoulders, everything in that case. Number one is a squat. Number two is a bend of some kind or a hip hinge where we're targeting the back posterior chain, everything calves, hamstrings, glutes, low back, shoulder blades, where we're pulling up. So in this case, we would look at a deadlift of some kind or a single leg deadlift, something like that. Number three would be a split stance. Here we're working on one leg strength and stability through one leg, the pelvis, the rib cage, everything. An example here would be a lunge, where you guys get me into a split stance. I need to work on my balance. I'm working on my coordination, but I'm also working on strength of one side as opposed to 2 legs. It allows me to also identify, what side do I need to focus on more? Where are the imbalances in that sense? Number 4, we're looking at a push. Now we're talking upper body push. So anything in any vector or direction you want to push in, make sure you're doing something that pushes something away from your body, be it a shoulder press, a push up of something, or some kind of a dip, anything like that. 5 would be a pull. So you're rowing now, instead of pushing, you're pulling into the body. Here you're targeting things like your shoulder blade. You're targeting any back muscles there. Again, it can be a pull up, it can be a row, it can be an upright row, anything to kind of get you into that pulling. Right after that, we need to talk about core strength. I want us all getting away from the idea that crunches are the only core exercise or the best core exercise. It's actually not adding anything to our stability in our core. It's not helping us be stronger for longer, I'll say, because you're really just kind of in one motion working this. A better way to think about core stability and strength is talk about bracing. So a really good exercise you guys should be doing is either a plank on your hands, bracing your core with a straight back, or getting down to the elbows. You can do that on your side as well. You can even get up on your back and start bracing. But holding something like that for roughly, say, 20 to 40 seconds and then going through rounds. And the final one, the seventh one, would be a twist of some kind. And here we're talking about rotation or anti-rotation. So all my golfers out there, what happens if you're able to speed that club head up, but you're not able to slow it down with control and efficiency here, you end up pulling something or something's out of place at that point. So running through those again, actually we can go back to the screen, and I actually have this on here for you guys to be a bit more visual. So we're looking at squat, hinge, split, push, pull, twist, and number 8, I've added a light cardio exercise, 2 to 5 minutes roughly. So again, there's a million exercises you guys can insert, but if you're using this framework, it's going to be really easy for you guys to start picking things that you like to do. A squat, here we have a bodyweight squat, we have a deadlift of some kind, we have lunges, a push-up, a row, a plank, a V-sit twist. That would be sitting in a Russian twist on your hips and turning over. And then you do light cardio for 2 to 5 minutes. Now, my recommendation, if you're doing twice per week, is this is a full body approach. Pick the exercises that go in there. You're going to run through exercises 1 through 8 in succession with very minimal rest between those exercises. You're going to take roughly 2 minutes between, and then you're going to go for a second round if you feel like you want a little bit extra difficulty. I'll say that perform a minimum of at least 1 set each for roughly 12 reps to 15 reps, or if you're timing it, 20 to 40 seconds. And again, you can make it a longer rep. You can make it, you can move a little bit quicker. You can do more rounds to increase that difficulty, but start where you feel comfortable with exercises you feel comfortable with. So I will add as well that we were talking about how can these minutes add to the vigorous side. So if we're talking about high intensity interval training, a really great way to approach a workout structure like this would be to say, I'm going to use a work rest ratio of 2 to 1. So I'm going to work for say 30 seconds and I'm going to rest for 15 seconds, or I'm going to work for 40 seconds and I'm going to rest for 20 seconds. And then that gives you a 2 to 1 work rest ratio where you're working quite a bit, but you give yourself enough recovery time to work through 1 to 8, give yourself a bit of time to recover so you can come back to the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 100th round you want to do with some energy. That way it keeps your heart rate up. You're still getting your resistance exercise in. All of those minutes count towards your aerobic minutes. 2 birds, 1 stone. We can move on from this slide here. We're going to kind of keep pushing forward. Okay, we're on to some of my favorite stuff, mobility and flexibility. So first, let's quickly define mobility versus flexibility. If flexibility is the muscle's ability to passively lengthen and return to its original state. So it might be something where I'm reaching down to my toes, I'm kind of passively relaxing my body, I'm feeling a stretch, and then that muscle would be able to return. That's what flexibility is. Mobility is the muscle's ability to move through a range of motion with articular strength, control, and coordination. So mobility includes not only the structure of your joint, but the soft tissue and the nervous system as well. The main differences between the two is that mobility training offers longer lasting changes. Now, stretching feels good and gives you some relief to the tension you're feeling. By all means, please continue to do your stretching. But do it understanding that by passively lengthening a muscle for 30 seconds to a minute may give you some short-term relief, but then what happens? You go back to your regular habits and regular movement patterns, and then compensations come along with that. We end up coming back to the same stretches for relief. Now with mobility training, we are actively taking our joints and muscles and ligaments, tendons through a full range of motion. This leads to not only more useful ranges, not that flexibility is useless, but I'm actually able to use the range with mobility. I'm able to move things in that range. So not only more useful ranges, but longer lasting changes to the function of those tissues, which leads to better patterns and less compensations in your movement down the road. And that's all to say less compensations, I have less pain, less imbalances, less risk of injury. So mobility training is the way to restore your body's natural functions, as well as reduce and manage pain and muscle tension throughout your body. Our bodies adapt to the stimulus and inputs we give them, be it physical therapy, your personal training or your exercise, or even your daily movement patterns. All of those are inputs that our bodies adapt to. All of this has an impact on how we move and how we feel each day. So we're going to move to the next slide. So here on this slide, it's telling us that daily movement patterns will determine our movement abilities over time. And any poor patterns and habits lead to compensation in our movements. And that compensation is what leads to injury or pain down the road. So if we could once more bring that camera onto me, it's going to take us through a bit of an example and give us a couple different movements. Now, a lot of people that I work with know that I have a vendetta against sitting. I'm going to grab my chair here. And I think it's because I think as modern Western humans, we sit all the time. You know, we wake up, we have breakfast, we're sitting at the table, we commute to work, we're sitting, and we're never really sitting with good posture. So while I'm talking here, let's make a quick adjustment. It's likely that we're leaning back. I'd like us all to scooch our butt to the back of our chair, really feel that low back against the support here. And I'm going to sit up nice and tall. I'm going to make sure that my hips aren't spilling backwards. If my hips were a bowl of water, I'm not spilling it out the front. I want to hold that water up tall, so I'm actually going to bring my stomach forward over top of my hips. Now, is this a position that I should be holding the entire time? No. No, we all have our preferred way to sit here and there, but it is to say, let's be more conscious of how we're sitting and how often we're sitting. I'd like to say that, imagine I just got in a car and I'm going for a 10-hour car ride. Now I'm in this position for 10 hours. What happens when we get out of a long road trip? We stand up, we go, oh my goodness, and I'm so tight. Now, what would typically happen in that car ride is I'm sitting here with, I'm going to use the term short. It's not actually short, just immobile hips. I'm shortening the muscles in my hips, in my hamstrings. I might be leaning forward a little bit. I might even be, in fact, crouching in. So when I stand up, I'm actually fighting that posture. I'm not going to walk around like this all day because this is stupid. This is ridiculous. So what I do when I stand, I make little compensations. I might turn my back a little bit. My hips are going forward. My shoulders might come in, but I don't notice this too much. And then eventually you start standing again. But that was a 10-hour car ride. Imagine having this posture, not being aware of it for 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and never addressing the fact that, you know, we might be sitting in a way that's affecting the way that we're moving. What ends up happening here, pull you into my diagram. Thanks for staying with me, guys. We got two gentlemen here. We got Tom and Tim. Now, Tom, he's fairly stacked. He does his mobility training. He knows how to sit. He knows how to move. So this is my depiction of someone with very little compensation. Normal curvature of the spine, ribs stacked over the hips relatively neutral. We'll say neutral. Head, everything is aligned here. That's great. Now, Tim, he's a little bit more upset. Tim doesn't do much mobility training. In fact, he's been dealing with quite a bit of back, neck, shoulder pain. Now, we talked about sitting. What's happening here is that Tim's hip flexors are going to be what's tight. Normally what happens is if something's tight on this side, there's a weakness on this side. So I would recommend that Tim lengthens here and strengthens back here. Secondly would be these muscles along the back are going to be very tight because this compensation has our hips spilling forward, means we're going to have to lengthen here, strengthen here. Finally, he might be having some tension in the neck, means we need to lengthen through the chest and strengthen some of the back. So easy way for a self-assessment for you guys would be to say, where am I feeling tight? If I'm feeling tight on the front of my body, I got to lengthen on the front, I got to strengthen on the back. That's a general, I'm going to say, rule of thumb. It's not always applicable, but it's a good place to start. So Tim, not so happy. Tom, very happy with himself. Let's go back to our slides. Right on. We can go to the next slide as well. Okay, so what do we do? What do we do about this? How do we address it? Well, we need to add stimulus through mobility training to correct these compensations. number one thing to do is we need to first be more conscious of how we're moving or not moving, being how we're walking, sitting, standing, all of the patterns that we use every single day, even the way we sleep, it affects our mobility over time. So when we get into poor habits that lead to compensations, just figure out, you know, what could be contributing to that, and then how do I go about addressing it? Being conscious of it all the time is exhausting. I understand that, but you end up making these small incremental changes to some of the habits you have, and then it becomes second nature to you to stand differently or move differently. Next point would be work actively through a full range of motion in your exercises, in your mobility training for every joint, every single day. If passive stretching feels good, again, gives you some relief, by all means do it, but the lasting changes comes from mobility training. Take your movements through that full range of motion when performing, explore that range of motion. You know, a shoulder joint should be able to go in full circles. If you guys are feeling clicks, clacks, Rice Krispie shoulders, I call them, snap, crackle, pop, then that's an area we need to address. And if there's minimal pain there, there's no harm really in kind of getting better at that range of motion. Start introducing things slowly. If you're feeling pain through a motion, back off a little bit and keep working through a smaller range of motion until you can get to that range. If the pain persists, I highly recommend you go see your physical therapist and start digging into what's causing that and what are some strategies you can do to kind of fix that. And likely it's going to not be, I'm going to give you a needle and you're out the door. It's going to be, let's try to move differently and let's do some exercises. So if you guys are getting exercises from your physical therapist, please do them. Stick with those things. They work. Don't think that going in to fix pain here and there in your body is going to be a quick needle or a quick rub, because it needs to come from us. We need to be the ones that are changing our habits and changing the way that we're moving. The use it or lose it principle applies here. So over time, we lose the ranges that we don't use. So if I never had a reason to reach up over my head for something, over time, years later, I will not be able to reach over my head properly. I'll be compensating in some way. I'll have some pain in my shoulder, back, hip, whatever it may be. So if I never have the need to bend, squat, twist, reach, push, or pull in full ranges, I lose that range. The body adapts, and I'm left with these ranges that ultimately lead me to pain and discomfort. Next point would be, let's try to reduce our sit time. Put that in your daily reminder to get up and move. Try not to sit down for longer than, say, 60 minutes to 90 minutes. Do walking meetings. Try standing meetings. Stand at your desk. Get yourself moving. And if you are finding yourself, you have to sit quite often, let's do a quick body check, posture check. How am I sitting? Am I constantly kind of leaning to one side? Is my rib cage shifted one way? If that's the case, then likely that's exactly how our body's adapting. One last thing I'd like to do, since I think we do have a bit of time, it's a little bit of time, I'd like to bring the camera to me once more. I want to give you guys some practical applications. Two things that I definitely want you guys doing. And by the way, if you guys have some kind of athleisure wear on right now, feel free to join me with this. Two movements I need us doing. Number one is going to be for anything that related to sitting, and if you're feeling tension, it would be, I'm going to take one big step with my leg. I'm going to take two hands down to the floor. So when you see me from the side, my knee is over top of my ankle, right by my shoulder. If I'm having trouble getting into that posture, use a chair or something like that, we're right here. The idea behind this stretch would be, I'm working on my hip flexors here and my chest. So what I want us doing in this position is I'm going to drop my elbow to the ankle of that same side. I'm going to feel a stretch across my hamstring and groin here. And then I'm going to reach up to the ceiling towards that leg. As I reach, again, full range of motion, I'm trying to turn my chest to the left, and I'm trying to turn my chest open to the ceiling. I'm going to do about 5 to 10 reps of that, 3-5 seconds a rep. I'm going to go ahead and switch sides. Left side, elbow in, long sweeping reach as you go up, elbow in, long sweeping reach as I go up through full range of motion. Very last one I want you guys focused on, super easy while we're sitting. Cross that leg. Already I'm kind of turned through my hips. If we're crossing our leg here, I want us to bring our belly button closer to the front knee. So that's not to say I need to roll over. It's sit up tall, bring your stomach forward so that you're turning your hips. You should be getting a bit of a piriformis glute stretch on this side. Those are two great mobility workouts where you're getting some full range of motion and you're getting that stretch in there as well. I'll add that anybody that showed up today is also getting access to 2 links, both by Dr. Andrew Spina. They'll be in this presentation. One is a hip mobility drill. It's roughly 5 to 8 minutes. I recommend you guys check that out. And the other one would be a shoulder mobility drill where you guys are working on anything to do with the shoulder or rotation in the shoulder. Both of those links, highly recommend you check them out and try those daily. Anyone else in the webinar today will have access to a daily mobility routine as well that I designed. Again, recommend you do that first thing in the morning. I look forward to answering all your guys' questions. Thank you for all the time. I'll pass it back to Dr. Smeltzer. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Jamie. As always, your passion is contagious and inspiring. I think everybody wants to go out and stretch and get mobile. So thank you for that. So we've got some questions that have come in, and some of them you sent in ahead of time. A couple have come in now, so we'll get through as many as we can here. So first one I have is for Kelly Anne. So Kelly Anne, I know you talked a little bit about the Mediterranean diet and some of the best ways to use immunity with, or to build immunity with food. Perhaps you could also comment a bit on supplements to help build the most effective immune system.
Yeah, for sure. Our immune system, of course, is critical to keep us healthy and reduce our risk of getting viruses like coronavirus. Vitamin C is top of the list. And one of writers also submitted a question about that daily maximum of vitamin C is said to be about 2,000 milligrams a day. Beyond that, you may have issues with very loose stools from too much vitamin C. But that being said, vitamin C is strongly linked to reduce the duration and the severity of illness. We also look at vitamin D is important for our immune system. The use of probiotics to boost our immunity as well, considering 70% of our immune cells originate from the gut. So having a healthy gut is very important. And there's something else, Dr. Smeltzer, that we use with athletes to boost immunity, and that is glutamine. Glutamine, it's a non-essential amino acid, so that means our body makes glutamine when we eat complete proteins. But we take this as athletes about 5 grams a day. And the reason for this, glutamine is a fuel that's used by the immune cells. And so we use it just a bit of a booster. The maximum I would do would be 5 grams in the morning and 5 grams at night. And again, we use it during times when we're sick, or if you have that sore throat and feel susceptible that, oh, I might be coming down with something, then we take a bit of glutamine at bedtime. And the evidence on it is 50-50. At the same time, would it hurt to take it as an amino acid? 5 grams is not a lot, and the excess was simply going to flush away. So I guess we end up with expensive urine if we don't need it, but 5 grams is not a lot.
Great, thanks, Kelly Anne. Another one here for you. How should I change my eating habits or times of day that I eat while working from home?
Yeah, that being said, I'm a fan of eating minimum 3 times a day. And if we can start breakfast, let's say within 2 hours of waking. Not everyone is a fan to get up and go and grab something to eat right away. But if we can start to eat within a couple of hours, and then minimum, let's say have a meal within around 4 to 5 hours time span. That being said, I'm also a fan of giving our system a bit of a rest. And often that evening eating is not really related to hunger, but it could be related to other things, downtime, associations, oh, someone's walked into the room with popcorn and now I have an urge to eat. So I often like to recommend for many individuals, if we can, have about 2 or 3 hours of not eating before sleeping. And that way we wake up in the morning feeling hungry, ready to eat. Because if you wake up in the morning, you're not very hungry, you could still be digesting a big late night snack that we've consumed. And that's just not ideal to go to bed with high blood sugar overnight. That's not healthy for us. However, that being said, I'm thinking of Jamie and very active individuals. We do emphasize a protein-rich snack an hour before sleeping if someone is trying to put on muscle, the active demographic out there as well. So, but more often than not, I am recommending about a 12 to 14 hour overnight fast.
So is that the intermittent fasting that we're hearing about now, Kelly Anne?
Funny you should ask, that is very popular. I was just reading a review actually on intermittent fasting, and they looked at intermittent fasting typically where people might eat for a 3-hour window in their day or just a 6-hour window, or some might just do the 1 meal a day. And that being said, the evidence has shown that people are not losing weight at a faster rate than others who are just simply reducing their total calories. So we're finding that. Pros and cons to it. When there's a big window of time when we haven't eaten, and then all of a sudden we start eating, especially if it's a large meal, you might find now you have issues with reflux or constipation from not eating often. When we eat, it makes our system move, our bowels move. So if there's gaps of time when we're not eating, we worry that the digestive system might become too sluggish. But further to that, intermittent fasting and the 1 meal a day completely contradicts the message that we promote to build and maintain muscle. Instead, with an active population, we like to see protein consumed every 3 to 4 hours. And Dr. Stu Phillips out of McMaster University, a world-renowned Canadian in the field of building muscle, advocates for this. So it does contradict the intermittent fasting messaging and the 1 meal a day. And you know, one other concern that I have, if people are just doing a 1 meal a day, gosh, that seems like a binge eating situation. And I don't think that's a healthy practice to really, partake in over time.
Great, thank you. Jamie, one for you here. Is it better to work out in the morning or evening to get the maximum benefit?
It's a great question. I get that a lot. From my clients. When's the best time to work out? I will say it is dependent on really what you want to accomplish. A lot of my clients, they really want to burn fat. I do recommend doing something first thing in the morning. It helps kickstart that metabolism. Even doing what we would call fasted cardio works quite well. There are drawbacks to that. So please, I would recommend if you're getting into fasted cardio, first thing in the morning, do a little bit of research on it, read online what the benefits are of that. But doing a workout super early in the morning, first thing in the morning, I think is the best way to help boost that metabolism. It gets you moving through the day. You're also kind of addressing some of those pain points you might be experiencing. It helps you move better later on. So I'm a big proponent of moving early, moving often. That being said, I don't practice that. I can't usually work out until I have about 2 meals. So again, it's individualized. If you feel like you can't get one in the morning, you hate doing it, I do too. I usually work out around in the afternoon to break up my day, helps mentally release me, but also allows me enough food that I intake in my system to use that as energy, so I actually get the most out of my workouts in that sense.
Great, thank you. Another one here, I'll just do one final question, and I'll take this one, just a quick one here. Do I need to wear a mask when I go outside for a run? And I would say the same principles apply as they would if you're doing anything. If you cannot social distance, you should be wearing a mask. And so if you're running in a deserted area, country roads, nobody around you, no, you don't need a mask. But if you're going to be running on city pathways, roads where you might, or running with a buddy or a friend, then you might want to wear that mask. We know that particles may travel even a little bit farther if you're breathing heavily. And if you're running quickly, you've got a little bit of an airstream formed as well. So those respiratory droplets can spread. But if you're running alone and you're quite confident you won't be contacting anybody, then you can certainly go without a mask. Well, our time is up today. I'd like to thank both of you. As always, you just bring great knowledge, expertise, and advice and passion, and we just appreciate it all. A reminder to everybody, our weather is getting better. Things are starting to open up a little bit, but we really, really want to reinforce that social distancing is still in effect. Wearing a mask if you cannot guarantee that, and follow our public health advisory. Also want to remind you, share positive images, thoughts, comments, anything at all on our hashtag Wello community. We want to keep that positive community going. We want everybody to just stay healthy and safe. Have a great week. Next week, we have a guest speaker talking about brain hacks for productivity as we reopen and get back into some of our workspaces. So have a wonderful week. We'll hopefully see you next week. Bye-bye. Thank you again.